guys. In fact, yeah, man, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's just do it. You know what's been missing? I haven't been. You see, when we talk about being locked in, right? I believe that this comes down to this fundamental, and I'm so sorry, people, that I haven't launched the enneagram system properly for you guys. I'm going to, and I promise this is a work I plan to do soon to start. I'm going to break down the enneagram, but put it into context with actual numerology, with actual occult philosophy, as they used to use the enneagram symbol in Chaldea, you know, before thousands of years ago. What are we talking? 3,500, whatever, thousands of years ago, as opposed to this other enneagram thing that was invented in, you know, really in the 50s and the 60s, by these guys who took the Chaldean knowledge from a particular book and then warped it into something and applied their own ideas to it, which comes from psychology, has nothing to do with the occult at all, and sort of re-sculpted it, and now they're using it to redefine the meaning of number and numerology, which I think is toxic and dangerous, because there's a reason why numbers have meanings. Same as words. They're misappropriating, like you're saying, they're misappropriating everything in the modern age, aren't they? And they want us to be stuck in it. So I will definitely focus on that as a very real and a very important priority. But I think for this moment, it might be a good image to flash up here, because I think it does have relevance. So when we look at this enneagram idea, now we were talking about the entities, and it's quite relevant, I think, right? The number 4. This is where we are sitting at. Now, you'll notice the number 4 represents the builder, right? Who are running the show at the moment? The builders, right? And they are using... Sorry,
which glyphs are they? Which planets?
Number 4 is the North Node, and that's Uranus. So it's Aur, which means light, the light that shines out of your butt, basically, if you want to break it down, right? Or light, anus, the light that shines forth from one's a-hole. And there's relevance to this. We have the saying that someone thinks the sun shines out of their asshole, right? This is a saying. Like, have you heard it? Am I that old? It's still used, right?
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. Like, I don't know how out of touch I am, dude. It's been a while since, but when you think about what that means, when you say that about someone, then they think that they are the be all and end all, right? It's very much to do with elitism. Am I right or wrong? That saying. If you say someone thinks the light shines out of the sun shines out of their a-hole, they think they're better than everybody else.
Yeah,
right?
And you can't polish a turd comes to mind as well with that.
yeah. And this is exactly what we are fighting in the world right now, right? Elitism, and they think the sun shines out of their a-holes and that the rest of us are just cattle, right? And that they are a breed above us, better than us. And they use their knowledge of 4 and the power of 4. Now, Cosmic, we were talking about binding magic, right? And binding magic uses the number 4's power. Now, if you look at 4 and you look at 8, you'll see this correlation here. If you take a careful look at the correlation between 4 and 8, you'll see that there is a line connecting this, a yellow line connecting the 4 and the 8. So they become part of a structure, right? And the structure of 4 and 8 obviously is binding 3 and 4. And so 3 and 4 represents the expansiveness of Jupiter, which is optimization. And being optimistic is about optimizing. So 4 represents knowledge. But when you apply 3 to 4, you are optimizing 4, right? You are bringing the most optimal and perfect reflections of 4 out. And now you are numerologically sitting in the number 8, which is Saturn. And Saturn thus is the perfected power of 4 brought into dynamic extension, if you want to put it into like a word puzzle. And so Saturn is really how you bind, because Saturn has the knowledge of how to manipulate 4 and how to create an enclosure with 4. And so these people that want the sun these people who seem to us have the sun shining out of their a-holes. I like that, actually. It's quite cute. It's a nice way to refer to them. They are using the number 4 and the power of 4 to keep us stuck. Now 4 is the builder, and it represents knowledge, the encoded knowledge, right? This is the pyramids, the encoded knowledge. 4 is Muladhara chakra on one level. It's also higher chakra on another level, but it's actually bringing that knowledge of the higher into physical context. So Brahma has got the 4 faces facing outwards in the 4 directions. And these 4 faces are the key to creating magic, right? We were talking about it earlier, weren't we, Cosmic? About the shamanic expansiveness of consciousness, expanding the circle outside of yourself and recognizing that there are 4 membranes, recognizing that there are 4 directions and that there are 4 parts of the fundamental soul, right? In extension to the physical matter. So when that is brought into its expansive and optimizing potential, 8 holds that frequency and that vibration. So you can think of 8 as being 4 applied to itself in order to optimize itself and thus become dynamic, where 4 in itself is actually rather stagnant. And so what you're talking about is really the powers of 4 locking us in. But that power of 4 that is locking us in is also an incredibly powerful knowledge. And so these builders, these masons, they hold the knowledge of 4. This is why we go back to ancient Egypt in the land of the Kemets, right? The Kemetic priests, they praised the number 4 above all other numbers because it held the knowledge of technology in it. Yeah. And so these current priests that worship the number 8, Saturn, they wield the number 4 as a binding spell to bind humanity. And in that focus of binding humanity, they wish to limit humanity's, to limit the potential scope of humanity's utilities, shall we say, or our there's a better word for it, to limit our power and our ability to be able to bring out anything of productive spiritual value. And this number 4 is also a very important transition point. You notice the blue connection with the artist. Now, the blue represents a more feminine and a more different perspective. And so the 6 represents the harmony of 4, right? So the knowledge, when the 6, the 4 becomes matured into its crossing of the great river, shall we say, which is moving beyond stagnancy, moving flow of energy. It then needs to move around the number 5. And that's where we see our, one of my favorite glyphs. One of my favorite glyphs, Saturn, sigil, and square. I love looking at this thing. This thing makes me feel all gooey inside. It makes me feel all gooey inside when I look at it. It's like, it's like looking at home. But there's, excuse me? Is this some kind of a joke? There's some kind of nowhere out of here, so far away from here. Okay, there we go. So when we consider that, and we look at the way in which this is now working, the way in which this whole story is being bound, right? Make sure that the volume is off for that. Then we see that the Saturn square here, and I'm sorry I haven't quite figured how to make this mouse bigger on this machine. This is my Linux machine, and Linux is not as easy as Windows, but safe. So you see here why the number 4 represents this particular corner here. This is the cornerstone, and this cornerstone, in extension, becomes expressed in its perfect form, right? As harmony, and that harmony can only come into alignment, which represents the tree of life, the axis mundi, if you will, with the centripetal and forces and the other forces which aren't centripetal. What are they? Centripetal, as well as centrifugal forces, right, of the toric field that is spinning. And you'll see the 6, they need to revolve around the number 5. And so what they take out of the picture is the number 5. And the way they take the number 5 out of the picture is they bind us using their evil magic with the maritime law. And the maritime law is of the frequency of number 5. It's mercurial. Mercury rules the maritimes. So all of the law of the sea is bound by Mercury, right? So you see how clever these buggers are, what they're doing here. They are forcing number 5 to have no real influence, causing this structure to become more stagnant than it should be. And in the process of causing this structure to be more stagnant, they cause us to be stuck, locked in a battle between these two opposing forces of centrifugal and centripetal forces. Let's call it the political left and the political right. Let's call it the forces of Lucifer and the forces of Ahriman. Let's call it the forces of capitalism or the forces of socialism. Let's call it the forces of, materialization or material atheism, or the evangelical, I'm crazy, with my spiritual belief, ready to throw it all to the wind because, I picked up a feather. So all these extreme polarities then have more influence on us because we aren't able to take the position of the central pillar, the middle pillar, as it's called, or the Sushumna in Vedic law, which is the extension of 4 becoming 6. And that right angle, right, the other Masonic emblem, okay, is then squared by the 8. This is why 8 becomes the powerhouse that is able to hold the essence of harmony and apply it to the number of 4. And so this is why we say 8 is the dynamic expression of 4 and brings all the powers of 4 into dynamic extension under the watchful gaze and the harmony of number 6, right? And so they use this Saturnian power. They lock us in with the number of 5, and they program us with the number 2. The number 2, obviously, this is the lunar currents. So they program this lunar currents of the number 2 into us with film, right? With the, and I'm going to say this once, I want you guys to pay attention, the silver screen, the silver of the moon. They turn us into lunatics. They make us crackpot crazy. That is the negative side of the number 2. When one becomes so involved in one's internal reality that one is able to lose perspective of the number 8. For the 8 is the Lord and ruler of the physical domain, while holding its context of knowledge and 4 and its harmony of 6. And when we then apply this contradiction between 8 and 2, they then push us to become in a state of denial of the number 2, denial of our emotions, and we're then schooled, educated. In the process of our education, we are taught to look up and pray to Big Brother, number 8, the Lord over us. We are forced to wear a watch on our hands. We are forced to look at a clock. We are forced to listen to the bell ring for your next class, right? And so 8 then becomes the systemic programming of the school system and the tuning of the etheric field, in the same way that 2 is the empathic emotional field through which we become induced into emotional states by the silver screen. So you can see how these forces are all sort of being manipulated and used by these builders, these who carry the number 4, that worship the number 4, that worship the building of the pyramids. And so they use the symbol of the pyramid, right, on the dollar bill, because the pyramid was the perfection of the number 4's extension in ancient Egypt. Number 4 was what they lived for. And the pyramid was this of land Kem, because in the ancient land of Kem, knowledge was prized above all things. So, you know, I think that can give us an insight into, and just to be clear, number 2, we were talking about the silver screen. That is to do with empathy. So they teach us to apply our empathy to the silver screen and the characters on the TV, right? And they then disconnect us. Remember I said the number 5. They flood our senses with the energy of 5, with the maritime law. And in the process of flooding us, they create a network of communication that they can control through the number 8, right? Controlling that through the number 8, as we showed you here, yeah? And controlling the number 5, which is the maritime law, they disconnect us from communicating with each other. And they do this using technology so that we become slaves to text, right? And the pretext, you know, is what is our real enemy here, is that we aren't talking to each other anymore. That gives them an opportunity to intercept our communications and manipulate our ideas based upon these communications, because they put us into a group setting, which is a false setting on a social networking platform, governed by bots, governed by AI, governed by all of these different infrastructures which are based upon the number 8 to control the number 5. So if you look at this 4 strategy, the 4 strategy is to use 8 to control the number 5 and use the 8 to manipulate us through the number 4, right? With their magic of knowledge. So what they are programming us with in the schools is the knowledge of 4, which is a stagnant form of knowledge and is dead effectively, because there is no dynamism. Knowledge requires dynamic expression. 8 is of its own accord. Saturnial isn't a dynamic expression of 4. So, you know, these are just a couple of ideas that pictures that can help us to sort of, you know, get a sense and just do the achiever. The last nail in their proverbial coffin that they make for us is we now have to compete, right? We have to compete to become the achiever. And so we get this false sense of completion, 9. And 9 represents competency, right? Because the competency of number 8 is the competing. And 8 represents the competency necessary to achieve. And that competency causes us to become highly competitive, and then we reach the goal of success. And that success points back towards material success, and we get the false sense of crossing the threshold of the center of the circle, which is where no number lives. And that no number is, we call it a 0. And when we cross that threshold, we're back in the next loop of 10. 20, 30. And so we're going round and round in these sort of almost pointless circles, and they keep us locked in. Also, if you look at the sigil, you've got the Mer, the ocean in the center, the maritime control of the law, Mercury. And then you've got around it, you got the Ka and the Ba channels represented by the 2 different directional points, pivots. And so centrifugal and centripetal force represent the Ka and the Ba. And the Mer, that's the heart of motion, which is still, represents the ocean.
What's An? Anunnaki.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
First, I'll break it down using the hieroglyphs, which became Phoenician and Paleo-Hebrew. So the A represents the ox, represents the bull of heaven, right? The N represents the serpent of transformation and alchemy. So the ox of heaven, the bull of heaven that crawls across the sky and brings the serpent's wisdom of transformation and change and growth to the universe, right? That's An. And then we see the Sumerians. An is actually the supreme Sumerian object of kingship, right? And so this was like, you know, the original Uruk was founded in An. And so An, remember in the ancient times, the bull of heaven was fundamental. And the serpent, the bull of heaven and the serpent together. It's where the serpent and the bull of heaven meet. So An represents the most profound level of divinity that we can consider, that is the source of transformation and change in the powers of life moving through matter and this universe. Then if we want to bring this into a context that we can, hold on, there was another one. Before I take it into the next context. So then we've got Ses, right? So Ses is obviously, there we see it, Ses, literally pronounced Ses, which is Proto-Germanic, right? Very ancient. And that is found in the graveyard of language in the Proto-Indo-European, right? Shweksh, which is ses, which is 6. In English, it's become 6. Shweksh, 6. So you can see how all of these languages are revolving around the number 6. So we've got the number 6 at the core. Now, just to bring this out so that we can see how this fits, and this is actually yet more evidence of why the number 6 is, why the number 6 represents Venus, the artist, the harmony, right? Venus as the artist and as the harmony also is the, you know, when you see an archway in building, or anywhere where there's a great arch, that represents the number 6. Represents the harmony of Venus. For Venus carries an ancient title apart from Lucifer, right? The light bringer, which comes through the arch, the arch of the heavens, right? But when you're traveling through a doorway, you're traveling through, this is Venus, right? When you're traveling between the worlds, this is Venus. So Venus represents the gateway to the mysteries. And the gateway to the mysteries is bound in the art, right? Art holds the secrets to the gateway of mysteries. And within art, we find beauty. Now, beauty is Tiferet in the Western occultist system, which represents the fundamental heart, right? And is actually the goal of all occult work, is to awaken that center within us so that we can become who we truly are. And this is bringing us back to the conversation previously about personal power, about self-knowledge. Tiferet, beauty, harmony, this awakens the way towards self-knowledge. When we walk in the forest and we are inspired by the beauty, right? And we see the hand of artistry that has created this tapestry of beauty that we call life and matter and this reality. That is when the heart awakens. And when the heart awakens, self-knowledge starts to bloom like a rose. Hence, the rose is the symbol of Venus. This is why in the older Kabbalistic schools, you will find that in Tiferet, they have Venus. Even though modern Kabbalistic schools will apply the sun to the stone. But in the older schools, Venus was applied to Tiferet, which is food for thought. And Saturn was applied to Hot, the head, where the head rules, the etheric plane. So we can see how this notion of the heart, Shesh, so ancestors, okay. So Taurs, now you live in England, right? What is a Taur? A Taur is a mountain. So that big conical hill, which is represented by a pyramid, which is represented by a tower, which is represented by the word Tur. Tur is to cast a spell in, you can take the word in Old Germanic, right? Let me show you what I mean. From Dutch and to Proto-Germanic, right? The word Turvenar. So to Turvenar, Turio. And that's, you see, Afrikaans, I've got this gateway in here, which goes through Dutch back to Proto-Germanic, right? Related to magic. Okay. So here we see An being the supreme power that moves the ox across the sky, the great bull of heaven, that is bringing the serpent's wisdom of transformation through the spirit of harmony that opens the gateways into the mysteries where true magical power can be accessed. Ancestors. Isn't that beautiful, huh?
Did you say that the serpent was Nu? So the An was bull of heaven, and then the Nu was serpent.
Yeah, is related to the tarot card for death, which represents transformation, which is symbolically connected to the shedding of the serpent's skin in ancient times. And the sign of Scorpio has very ancient echoes relating it to the serpent because of the serpent's nature of shedding skin to transform itself. And the Scorpio sign relating to this. And so Nun represents a fish in the school of thinking from the hieroglyphic coming from the Phoenician to Paleo-Hebrew. And the fish is used because it represents that which is a hidden life, hidden from us. So you need to use the serpent's power of transformation to shed your skin so that you can become the fish, to be reborn. The fish is a symbol of eternal life, right? Of perennialism. And so the fish as a symbol of perennialism is that hidden life under the water that you need to embrace. And that's why Scorpio is so associated with the occult, through it representing the power of the serpent. And hence, Scorpio is related to sexuality, right? And the sexual organs, which is the Muladhara root chakra in men, which is where the Kundalini serpent power resides.